Hi, and good afternoon, everyone. We're just waiting for Marc to come on screen, but we thank you for joining us today for our webinar on best practices in finding staff in 2021. Our presenter is Marc Belaiche, so you want to say hi to everyone, Marc?
Hey, hi, Rachel. Hi, everybody.
And he is the president of TorontoJobs.ca. And for those of you that don't know who we are a recruitment and internet staffing company specializing in helping find candidates in the Toronto area. And our recruiting division specifically focuses on accounting and finance roles, which is the reason that we're conducting this webinar today. So we're so excited that you could be here. I know it's Monday, and Mondays are the toughest. I think it's Blue Monday, I think, or January. It's the January blues or something of that nature. So hopefully everyone's feeling refreshed and kind of happy today instead of feeling the blues. But I know January is typically the Marc, the statistically toughest.
Third Monday in January.
Month. Yeah. I don't know. I'm feeling good. How about you?
I'm okay. Yeah.
Good. So thanks again for joining us today. This presentation is really going to focus on public accounting, right, Marc? So
that's right.
It is going to give general tips about best practices in finding staff in general. So if you're not an accounting firm, it'll still give a lot of information, but we are going to pivot a little bit towards accounting roles. So just want to give Marc an introduction and go through a little bit of the technical stuff with the webinar today, just before Marc gets into his presentation. So Marc, you do have some stuff prepared. There will be no slides. It's more of an engaging, we kind of want it to be a Q&A session. I know you have some tips and some stats and things like that you're going to share. So we ask that if you do have any questions, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the duration of the webinar. So at the very bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box. So at any point, if you have a question, I'll be monitoring the Q&A. So if you want to stick it in the box below, I don't know, Marc, do you want to take the questions at the end? I guess people can ask them throughout the presentation, and then when you're done your content, we can do the Q&A period.
Yeah, sure. Throughout is fine. I'll keep an eye on the questions that come up, and I'll ask them or answer them as we go along here, kind of thing.
Okay. And I can come back during the end just to answer any outstanding questions as well. So you can use the Q&A box to answer any questions that you might have, or if you have you have a question or something throughout the duration, feel free to put it in the Q&A box, and I will respond to you. Other than that, that's about it. There's not a lot of technical stuff. You're already on the webinar, so that was the hardest part. So I'm just going to give Marc an introduction, and then I'm going to kind of mute myself, and I'll be back towards the end of the presentation. So Marc is a CPA and CA, member of the Human Resource Professional Association, as well as on the board of the Halton Peel CPA District Association. Marc has been in the recruitment industry since 1995. Is that right, Marc?
Yeah.
So lots of experience. You're in good hands today. Prior to TorontoJobs.ca, Marc was a recruiting manager in the staffing industry and has worked at Prudential Insurance and KPMG in accounting and auditing roles. So synergy wise, like, we got your accounting background, your CA, and then we also have recruiting. So no better person to talk on this topic than you. And I also just want to mention just a few events that we have. We don't only do webinars, we also host, we used to do live conferences. So we've switched to doing virtual conferences. So just wanted to mention a few of those that we have coming up. I'm sure, Marc, you're going to kind of touch on them too. So February 3rd, we have an event for entrepreneurs. So if you do own your own firm, that's February the 3rd. And I will put the links for all the events in the chat box as well. We have a CPA PD Day. So if you're looking to get some credits, that's February the 11th. And we have a President's Conference on February 25th and a CPA Firm Partners Conference on March 16th. So again, I'll put more information in the chat box. I'll also put, Marc, your contact information there and just some links throughout the duration of the webinar. So I don't want to take up too much more time. I will leave it to you, Marc, and I'll be back later.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Rachel, as always.
All right, awesome.
Thanks. Great intro. So thanks very much for being on, taking some time out of your busy day to hear what I have to say. I've been involved in recruiting for 25 years, as Rachel had mentioned. This is my 26th year. And I'm sure you want to get just right into what's going on. So I've kind of subdivided this presentation into a couple of areas. First of all, I'm going to run through just some thoughts and observations of the jobs landscape in Canada, and really a mini state of the Canadian labor market. If you've heard me speak before, I give a quick update as to what's happening. And then I'm going to share my tips, top 10 tips and best practices of hiring staff in 2021 for staffing for public accounting firms. And in general, I mean, some of these tips apply obviously to different companies and organizations, but specifically this presentation is more so for public accounting firms. And then I'll take questions, and I should be able to wrap up within the hour. So thanks for taking the time, as I mentioned. So I like to start off first off with just a review as to where we're at in terms of the Canadian labor market. So the Canadian economy has gone through some major turmoil, obviously, over the course of the year. We've had in 2020, if you think about 2020, we went from having a really optimistic start in January and February. We were at the lowest unemployment rate ever recorded in Canadian history at just over 5% in February of 2020. And then the pandemic hit in March, and we lost, as a country, we lost 1 million jobs in March. And then in April, we lost 2 more million jobs, so 3 million in total over the course of the March and April time period. So in May, we got to the highest unemployment rate ever recorded in Canadian history at just over 13%. So we went from, within a few months, we went from the lowest unemployment rate in Canadian history to the highest unemployment rate in Canadian history. Now, as the year continued on through 2020, we actually regained a number of jobs, and they actually came back. And in some months, we had 300,000, 400,000 jobs that were created, which was very encouraging. Now, in the month of December, which is the last month that we have figures for, the most recent month, the economy lost 63,000 jobs, and this was the first decline since April. Now, that was comprised of 99,000 part-time jobs lost and gains of 36,000 on the full-time side. Now, Statistics Canada, which is where I get this information from, they blend in both full-time and part-time jobs together. So if it's a full-time job, it counts the same as a part-time job. So they don't really decipher. Now, the unemployment rate currently stands at 8.6%, and it just went up slightly from where we were in November, which was 8.5%. So we're now at 8.6% as a country, lower obviously than the 13% that we had at the height of the pandemic job-wise, but quite a bit higher than where we were in February of last year. Now, across Canada, the number of people that are unemployed, 1.755 million. The number of people working in Canada, 18.5 million. The youth unemployment rate is the highest of all categories, 17.7%. The unemployment rate for Canadians 15 to 69 who belong to a population group designated as a visible minority was 9.9%, so just above the national average. And then the unemployment rate for workers over 55 years of age was 7.9%, so below the national average. And just some other stats for you. Being an accountant, I like the number side of it, but across Canada, the province with the lowest unemployment rate is Quebec at 6.7%. The province with the highest unemployment rate across Canada is Newfoundland and Labrador at just over 12.3%. In terms of cities, the highest unemployment rate across Canada is in Barrie, Ontario, and the lowest unemployment rate is Quebec City at 4.1%. Toronto, Greater Toronto Area stands at 10.7%, and Vancouver is at 7.4%. So just to give you an idea. Now, obviously, Canadians working from home is a key area right now. Question that I get a lot from companies and firms in general. What are people doing? And I'm going to cover that shortly. But at the height of the shutdown in April of last year, just over 40% of people worked at least half their regular hours at home. And as the labor market improved during the spring and summer, this percentage fell to 25%. Then as the number of COVID cases reached or increased in the fall, the percentage went up to 29%. And I suspect that in January, because of the lockdowns, especially in the province of Ontario, it will significantly increase with the lockdown from the Ford government. Now, what we're also finding is what we're calling a he session or a she session compared to a he session that we had in 2008 and 2009. Why do I say that? Well, the majority of the jobs that have been lost in Canada this year have been female. These are females who have been hardest hit uh, because of the industries that they're in are that have been adversely affected by COVID have been female dominated industries. So this includes travel, tourism, retail, food services, hospitality. So they're calling this the she session or she recession. Now, you probably know that we're technically haven't been in a recession. It feels like it for sure, but we haven't had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. Now we'll see what happens with fourth quarter, but we did have a big hit, of course, in Q2 of 2020, followed by a rebound in Q3 of 2020. So we're technically not in that in a recession, but it certainly feels that way. But they do call this the she session because most of the jobs that were lost, about 60 to 65% of jobs that were lost, have been female and female dominated industries. Now, if you're old enough to remember, in 2008 and 2009, we had the credit crisis, and the majority of the jobs that were lost back then were male dominated industries. So that was the he session or he recession. 60 to 65% of jobs lost back then were male dominated, primarily within the manufacturing industry. Now, what we're having, and if you watch this, if you follow recoveries and so on, we have what's called a fancy K here, K-shaped recovery. Sometimes we have an L-shaped going down and across. Sometimes it's a W up and down. Sometimes it's a V, which we usually hope for. But right now we have in the jobs market anyways, a K-shaped recovery. So some of the industries and jobs have done well during the pandemic. For example, think of companies like Zoom or Netflix in the technology area that have done very, very well. Now, and some people's wages have gone up and so on. Now, on the lower end of the K shape is industries that have not done well. I mentioned travel, hospitality, tourism, so on. These areas have seen wages that have been really cut. Think of restaurants and bars, for example. And a lot of those people are hourly workers or hourly employees. So those were hardest hit during this pandemic, especially. Now, I talked to a lot of people, a lot of job seekers, a lot of people working, some people that have been in industries that haven't really been hard hit. A lot of them, people have had their wages cut and reduced, maybe slashed in half and so on. Some have had bonuses during this time, which is really a tale of two different cities. In public accounting, I've actually seen fairly steady salaries. They haven't really gone down very much. And in fact, a lot of our clients are talking about how work is up there and it is actually hard to find people in public accounting. And that's why I thought doing this webinar would be helpful and advantageous if you are in a position that you are looking to look for staff. So that's what we have from a jobs perspective, a K-shaped recovery. Now, COVID is obviously hurting women's careers. More research from LinkedIn found that female employees are being disproportionately more stressed than their male counterparts by work-related issues. In fact, 74% of women suffered from employment stress last month compared to only 57% for men. Now, it could be that the one notion is that that COVID-19 is overtly more damaging to women's career aspects. A lot of people, a lot of females have had to care for their families, have had more of their household responsibilities put on them. So how can you help in that area? It begins, especially if you're an employer, it begins with frank and open communication. Remind your employees of the resources that you offer, some of the counseling services, any hotlines, guidance that you have. But certainly the focus for all organizations in 2021 needs to be mental well-being. And I will talk about that in my 10 top tips shortly. Now, there's other programs that the government has put out. As you probably know, there's the wage subsidy program and other government programs that have been very helpful for companies. Ontario, the province of Ontario is investing $77 million to help the unemployed to find work. So there's a lot of programs that have been out there that have been very helpful for trying to get people back to work. Now, the global economy, of course, faces fears of a long-term damage. In fact, they're calling this potentially the lost decade, as COVID-19 cases have surged over the last little while. This is a report from the World Bank called Global Economic Prospects Report for 2021. It warned of a lost decade, especially for countries that failed to get on top of the pandemic early. Now, besides the immediate damage to the economy caused by interruptions to trade, domestic commercial activity, and job losses, the World Bank worries that such factors as piling up of public and private debt and a breakdown of education will lead to a deterioration for a long time in economic prospects. Now, some companies and some firms have used this to their advantage, and some companies have been villains. So there's heroes and villains. So some of the heroes, the companies that pitched in, restaurants offering free meals, and you may have some clients that were in that area, companies that pivoted to be involved with switching from, production of alcohol to hand sanitizer, from production of plastic materials to PPE, and so on. And some of the villains are some of the major corporations that paid out dividends while taking taxpayer cash, and food apps that were charging outrageous fees. So I'm kind of diverting a little bit from the job side, but I will get back to it very quickly. But some businesses, as you probably know, used what was going on to exploit the situation and fatten their bottom lines, and others took an opportunity to help others and help out with on that end. So I'm not going to get into my top 10 tips of what you should do if you're a public accounting firm, or if you're an organization. Again, these tips can really be applicable to all types of organizations, but I'll try to veer specifically towards public accounting. So number one thing that we did get taught through this time period, and I'm going to post these suggestions right in the chat area so that at least you can see what my tips are as we go along here. But number one, learn to be more adaptable. We've had to do that, of course, but it's important for your company and your firm to be able to adapt during the crisis. Analyze your business model, analyze what has worked for your firms and what hasn't worked. And companies and firms are now accommodating the employee in how the work gets done, hours, and so on. And sometimes sometimes some firms call me and say, "Hey, Marc, we've had a couple of people leave," and you really have to do exit interviews to find out exactly why they're leaving. You don't just want to send them off and not know exactly what's going on. Now, most of the time, people don't leave because of money. Well, I think you probably know that most of the time it's because of the manager. That in fact, that's the number one reason over the years that the person that is leaving a company or firm because of their manager. Before the pandemic, the number one reason for a small amount of time, especially if you're in the Greater Toronto area, was to reduce the commute, because the commute was really terrible in the Greater Toronto area for anybody traveling more than half an hour, 45 minutes, or an hour, for example. So now the issue is more about, is the firm adapting? Is the firm not giving me too much work? And when I interview people who are in public accounting and they're looking for a change, a lot of time, those are the reasons. Sometimes it's about, well, the firm wants me to work at the office. I'm just not comfortable working at the office. Some firms have changed. They've given the choice to their employees. Some firms have kind of said, "Hey, look, this is what we want to do, and this is how we want to approach it." Now, forget about all the rules right now in the current lockdown in Ontario. If you're watching from Ontario, forget about that side of it. In general, you really have to be adaptable. So that's my number one of my 10 tips, really being adaptable. Learn to be adaptable. And I always say, well, how do you, people might say, well, how do you adapt? Well, I'm always prone to asking people what they want. Is this working for you? Do you want something different? Don't just assume because this is the way you want it, or this is the way you if the firm has been there, that this is how you want to create your team and how you want to work. So be adaptable, but also ask for some advice and some feedback from your employees. Now, culture is very important as well. And that is something that, how do you create that culture? You had a culture before March 15th of 2020, for example, and then all that changed. Everything changed through the firm. People changed, people working from home. How do you create that culture again? So, having regular meetings with them, talking to them and so on. Now, point number 2 is being more open to remote work. And when you're trying to recruit people, you have to have an idea as to whether the person is going to be working from home, or if they're going to be working from the office, or it's going to be a hybrid kind of thing. Now, nobody knows exactly how this thing is going to play out after the pandemic is passed and everybody's getting vaccinated and so on. But for now, people want to know, if you're trying to attract your new employees, are they going to be training internally in the office? Or are they going to be training virtually? Can they work from home? Some clients, well, actually what we generally see is about a third right now. So a third of firms and companies have all their employees back and they're working and they can socially distance and they've got whatever dividers and hand sanitizing stations and so on, but they just feel that it's better working in the office. A third of our clients and firms and organizations out there are the complete opposite, where they have just said, hey, come work from home. We don't want you to come in. We don't want to take that chance. And that's what we find from, some of the bigger firms and also some of the bigger organizations out there, like some of the big banks and some of the companies like Shopify, who have said, like, we don't want you to come back at all. And then a third are hybrid. So we have some clients that have people coming in for 3 days a week to the office, and then 2 days from home on a week. And then the next week is the opposite of that. So they have social distancing. They don't have everybody in the office at the same time. So that's kind of what's going on. But you need to communicate that when you're trying to recruit. You have to be prepared to answer that question. Am I working from home? Am I going to have to come to the office? And I can tell you, there's some people that do not want to go into an office, regardless of how safe you might have it. If you're trying to attract people, you want to really have that in place and try to understand how you might accommodate or how you're not going to accommodate. And you can go, look, we want people in the office because everybody else is here. Well, guess what? That will reduce the pool that you have to choose from in terms of candidates. So think of those issues, talk it through with your partners, think about what the setup that you want, but being more open to work or remote work and being more adaptable will help you attract more staff. Now, again, nobody knows what's going to come out of this afterwards, but think about what your plan is afterwards, and keep in mind that those who apply to future openings at your firm are already asking more and more about remote working. And what I would suggest is add that to your job descriptions to save time. So be very clear in your job descriptions as to what the plan is. This position will allow for 100% remote, or this position requires you to be in the office. But generally speaking, I would say be flexible and be adaptable. And just goes to my point number 1 about learning to be more adaptable. Now, again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the Q&A section. I'm happy to answer them as we go along here, and good discussion. And of course, you can always reach out to me if there's an issue that you want to talk to. I talk to a lot of firms every single day about what their situations are. And at the end of the day, obviously the choice is yours, but I'm giving you kind of what other firms are doing, because I get always the question about, well, I don't know what other firms are doing. So I'm telling you what other firms are doing because I know. Number 3 is improving employee mental health and wellness. This means providing more tools and resources for staff on how to improve their well-being, encouraging employees to take mental health days, helping members of your company communicate more about their concerns. If you have any programs available, make sure to communicate that with your employees. Remind them of the programs that are available. It's a serious issue right now, especially people working from home you have isolation issues, and it's okay to talk about it. It's not a problem to talk about. You need to talk about it because people are, especially if they're living on their own, they're feeling very isolated and very uncomfortable. So make sure to talk about it. Make sure to bring it up. Number 4 on my list, this is, if you're just joining, this is the top 10 list best practices of things that I believe you should be doing if you're hiring staff in 2021. Creating better employee engagement. So how are you maintaining engagement among your staff, especially those who live alone? I just talked about. Schedule casual Zoom meetings, not just all business all the time. Schedule casual Zoom meetings with your employees or encourage them to reach out to one another, at least as a starting point. Have mentors and partners for employees and have them check in on each other. And while you're at it, during the recruiting process, you always also want to talk about what programs you have available. So make sure to cover that off during the interviews, promote that in your job descriptions, promote that when you're talking to possible candidates about what is going on. It is still a tough time to find candidates. You not only have busy season going on / ongoing / upcoming, you've also got less people who are experienced. And on top of that, you've got people that are afraid of making a move because they're comfortable. They don't want to learn necessary new skills. They kind of are fearful of what may linger somewhere else. So a lot of people are afraid of making a move right now too. So you have to pull them out and you have to find those key things that will attract them. And I'm telling you that there's employee engagement is important, being adaptable, allowing for remote work. These are all things that will make your firm a lot more attractive to potential other job seekers. Now, which kind of leads to number 5, and that is updating your company perks. Now, you may have employee benefits that may cost you, you might be in a group plan and it might cost you $200 or $300 or maybe more a month per employee. Well, your employees' needs are changing and they have changed, especially if they're working from home. So for example, review your company's benefit package to ensure that it has the benefits that truly are needed by your employees. Maybe some of the perks aren't necessarily needed anymore that you had before that you thought, hey, this is a great idea to have. But mental health and wellness options, that's really important. Including something like this will also go beyond our current pandemic situation and really will boost productivity and morale within your company and will have people talking to their friends and family members about what your firm is doing. Now, you can obviously also entice your current staff to refer people if you're struggling to find people. And some of the referral bonuses can range anywhere from a couple hundred to a few thousand, depending on the level of a referral bonus for an existing employee to refer somebody who might be good for your firm. So consider that as well. But coming back to the benefits, during the pandemic, some companies and firms and organizations have enhanced benefits by providing things like credit for employees to purchase a new desk or a chair. For example, $200 credit to spend on a new chair or a new desk, or $500 or $1,000 or whatever the amount is. You're obviously saving money by not having your employees in your office regularly in many cases. So think about that. A lot of people, if they're working from home, they may not tell you, but they may not be set up ergonomically to work from home. They might not have a desk. They might be working from their dining room table or their kitchen table. They might not have an appropriate chair for themselves. And especially if you're asking them to work from home all the time, you want them to be comfortable as well. Maybe other perks and some of the other things that some firms are doing are reimbursing for internet, adapting your benefit plan to provide other perks. But there may be other benefits that your company is paying for that is not being used, and those funds can be redeployed to other perks. So again, if you have a group benefit plan, maybe it's time to have a look at that and see where you might be able to redeploy some of the cash to other areas as well. So keep that in mind. So that's number 5, updating your company perks. Number 6 is, this may or may not apply to you in all cases, but automate your entire recruiting process. Think of all the processes that you have to find staff and try to automate them as much as possible. If you think about how Amazon redeveloped and how they changed around their delivery system, think of how you can change that. How do you make it more automated? How do you make it more efficient? Now, there's all kinds of examples. Like there's a company called, or there's a robot Vera who is Russian, who can make 1,000 calls a day and do 50,000 interviews daily. Now, you probably don't need something as sophisticated as that, but think of your entire process. How are offers being handled? How are interviews being handled? How are candidates being received? Do you have a database of people who have previously applied? Do you know who has applied to you previously? And maybe somebody that you interviewed 2, 3, 4 years ago, maybe they're in a position that is now a good candidate for your organization or your firm. So think about that entire process and what you can do through there as well. Now, number 7. Now this goes back to kind of where we are, people working from home. Look across Canada and around the world for employees. Working remotely, look, might be the new thing, and it might be here forever, or it may disappear eventually. Nobody really knows. My gut tells me that we're going to have some kind of hybrid model once we're said and done here. But the reality is, it's here. We're all here. There's no clear direction really what the work environment will look like in the future, and no one can clearly say with any kind of a positivity that this is what it's going to be like. In fact, we might have some industries that are 100% remote. Some are 100% at an organization, at an office, especially when it comes to public accounting. However, with people being close to an office being less of an issue, look beyond geographic constraints to find staff. Go to areas where there's higher unemployment if you're able to accommodate remote work. Now, remember, I told you that Barrie, Ontario had the highest unemployment rate in Canada of a metropolitan area. Newfoundland and Labrador had the highest unemployment rate as a province. If you're able to accommodate remote work, and if you're able to find people in those geographic areas, you're going to have more leverage. And when you have more leverage, it means that you might be able to get a better candidate. You might be able to save money on staffing and so on. So don't think of just the box of, if you're in the Toronto area, of I have to hire somebody who's close to our office, because maybe that person can work continuously from home and remotely. Now, you should also obviously look at government programs available. There's lots of them out there. There's the wage subsidy program, if you haven't already applied for that. There's hiring of students programs as well, and there's training grants. And I'm happy to share those with you if you'd like to reach out to me at all. Now, next up, again, I'm going through my top 10 tips, hiring tips, and finding staff in 2021. Spelling out, now this is, I'm on number 8, and I'm posting them in the chat here in case you missed anything or you want to revisit something. But number 8, spelling out expectations for being or not being available. So what you want to do during the interview process is really be clear as to what the expectations are for people needing to be available or not available. I know with the pandemic and people working from home, and some people have kids and some people have other obligations with being at home, some people really like the flexibility of being able to work perhaps a couple of hours in the morning, maybe 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon, another 2-3 hours at night, because they can get the work done. So really letting people know during the interview process what the expectations are, how many Zoom meetings there are, what you will and won't accept and adapt to, and trying to cap it, like allow for breaks. People are still really looking for work-life balance. In fact, some of the stats show that people are working more on the weekends than they ever did before. Maybe it's because people think, oh, I'll just do a couple of hours on the weekend. Forget about busy season for a second, but just in general, people from across Canada are working more hours on a weekend. So try to cap it, allow for breaks, communicate what the hours should be. And don't forget that people are still looking not only for that mental health and wellness, but they're also looking for the work-life balance. So set out the expectations right up front as to what that would be. Number 9, almost done here on this list. Job seekers are more in tune with health and safety. So what is your company, what is your firm doing for health and safety? There are job seekers who want to know, do you have safeguards? Are there sanitizing stations? Is there plexiglass between employees and anyone customer interfacing? Do you provide sick days? Of course, this is a very hot issue, especially in Ontario, where people are afraid of calling in sick because they fear they might lose their job or not get paid. Now, obviously, it's not going to apply necessarily to a senior manager or a principal within your firm, but when you are talking about seniors, accountants, students, they have a fear that if they were to call in sick, am I going to still have a job? So really be aware of that. And what is your policy? Make sure people know and understand that. And I want to also mention just about not only policies for sick days and health and safety, but a lot of what happened over the last, let's call it 10 months or so, is policies just flew out. They were just basically ripped out and they got changed overnight. So where it was an issue where people couldn't work from home before because their managers didn't want them to, it went from that to completely the other way, where we don't want you work from home, stay home, where we want to do our part for controlling the pandemic and reducing the spread of COVID. So what has happened also while that was going on was that policies got rewritten, but they were never actually written down anywhere. They were never communicated to staff. So make sure there's a very clear policy as to what it is. If it changed, you want to have a clear policy as to what that is. In our company, we went from working in the office to everybody working from home overnight. So our policy is don't come into the office unless you want to. Sometimes people want a break, but that may or may not be what might work for you or your firm. So just really be aware of that. Number 10, and this one is probably my favorite of the list, is making everything more visual. Job descriptions should have videos on them. I've seen so many firms where all they do is they just take an old job description and they just slap it together and they post it on their website or they share it with recruiters. And there you go. It's the same old, same old. Well, the world has changed. While you're just copying and pasting your old job description, the world has changed. It's become more visual. It's become people want to see, they want to be able to watch with their own eyes what happens. So using videos, and it doesn't have to be very complicated in the sense that you can take your phone. If you're a partner or you're a senior manager or you're in HR, you can take your phone, create a 1-minute video about why somebody may want to work for your firm. That's it. Link that video to your social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat if you want. But it really depends on the type of job or the positions that you're looking to fill as to what medium you want to use. Obviously, LinkedIn is going to be more powerful and more relevant in the public accounting space. But if you're looking for other staff other than professional service, like a professional accountant, you may want to use different channels as well. So connect with, if you have somebody on your marketing team, connect with them, ask them for some tips, but really just do a video. It's really easy. It takes a minute to do. Just talk about the firm, the company, what the role is, why you should have people apply. It adds such a different element to the role. Now, I did say that I had 10 tips. I have actually a bonus number 11 here, which I'm going to just share with you right now in the chat. And that is train your line managers on interviewing virtually and practice. It's one thing to have your line managers interview with you in the room or close by, or if there's an HR person, but it's a total other thing when they don't know how to interview candidates by video. And if you are in that boat, you want to practice. You want to get some tips. In fact, we have a TorontoJobs.ca YouTube channel that you can watch that has videos on how to interview if you are an employer. There's lots of things that you want to do, but practice not only yourself, but also with your line managers, perhaps other partners. Give them directions. I've seen a lot of very poor interviews being done by line managers right now, and from partners and from all levels. I get it that, say, you're an accountant, you're not a recruiter, you're not a videographer, but the reality is for these job seekers who are only seeing you for, say, an hour, and all they're seeing is this one box that you're in, right there, right there. That is all they're seeing. They're not seeing anything else. So really make sure to practice, get good lighting, make sure there's no kids screaming in the background, make sure the camera angle is good. In fact, some of the bigger firms have training for their partners to get better accustomed to being on video, whether it's Zoom, whether it's an interview or otherwise, but just giving them some tips. And that's who sometimes you're competing against. You're competing against the firms, big four firms, to get staff. So make sure that you are as prepared as possible, and make sure you're on time for the interview. And don't just fly in off the seat of your pants, but really be prepared. Look at the person's resume, because they're also looking to make sure that, you know what, you've spent the time to prepare, because they certainly will have as well. So those are my top 10 plus the bonus 11. I do have a few more notes here as well, just to conclude. But if you have any questions, you want to throw them into the Q&A area, you can also connect with me as well. But we do have some interesting events. I know Rachel was mentioning them before, but we have the Canadian Virtual Controllers Conference happening this Thursday, January 21st. And if you are interested in connecting with those controllers, you can certainly do that. We have a Connect and Learn, a series for entrepreneurs, on Wednesday, February 3rd from 2:30 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. And I know accountants and lawyers tend to connect with each other quite a bit. So we, TorontoJobs.ca, we're putting on the Canadian Virtual Lawyers Networking event. It runs for 1 hour on February 3rd, and you can connect with those people. And you can visit TorontoJobs.ca/news for more information about our virtual events. And you can check out also our new events website at eventlogic.ca. And sponsorship and exhibitor options are also available. So I'm going to throw this in the chat here as well, so you can kind of get an idea if there's something that looks interesting as well for you. And hopefully you can make it out to one of these virtual events. We've been doing live events for a long time, and in general, it's been one of those situations where the pandemic has changed our model. So we're doing these virtual conferences and so on. So now, just a few more things to wrap things up. I have written this book called Tales from the Recruiter. If you want a copy, just feel free to ask a question in the Q&A, and I'll mail a copy out to you as well. You can also read it online if you wanted to at talesfromtherecruiter.ca. It will help you with job search as well. And you can also check out our YouTube channels, TorontoJobs.ca. There's lots of videos there that can help you in terms of helping you interview, helping you find staff, tips on trends and changes. You can also visit our YouTube channel for Toronto recruiters as well. And I'm going to put those links in right now in the chat area as well, so you can certainly check that out. And you can also follow us on all our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So I'm going to throw those ones in there. And in terms of how we can help you, we do provide recruitment services for both temporary and permanent. So if you need somebody for your for a busy season on contract or temporary, we can help you with that. We also have our job board, and we also have full-time permanent staffing that we can help you out with. And as Rachel had mentioned earlier on, if you weren't on at the beginning, we also have our CPA firm partners conference as well that we put on as well. So I'm going to put this on here, this link, or my information, my contact information, so you can have a quick look at that as well. And other than that, I think that wraps things up. I know Rachel will probably be coming on shortly here as well. Thanks, Rachel. Hey, how are you?
Good. That was great. That was a lot of information.
Well, too much information, right?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I've heard it before. So
I know you have.
Well, there's always something new you add to it though. So it's great.
Well, I mean, Rachel, you and I have been in this business for a long time.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, Rachel and I have been working together for now, this is our 15th year coming up. Isn't that crazy?
It is. It's hard to believe.
So, we've seen a lot, we've been through a lot, and, obviously riding out through all the different challenges and so on. But maybe putting you on the spot, Rachel. I mean, you work with a lot of companies and firms too. Like anything that you have seen that just recently, I guess over the last year, just because of the pandemic, anything that you've seen that you say, yeah, you know what, like companies or firms in general might want to do this. I mean, I mentioned about the social media side of it too, which I know you're a real big fan of as well. But people working from home don't want to go back. Anything that you
I mean, I think you covered it. Like, I think the biggest thing that I've seen is taking care of your employees, right? So I know this is a recruiting, talking about how to find staff, but kind of taking care of the staff that you do have. I know a lot of people that have been affected very, negatively with the whole situation, whether it be a feeling of loneliness or a feeling of repetitiveness. It's hard being on a screen all day and not having that personal interaction. A lot of business meetings took place at lunch or on the golf course, or and now everyone's just kind of confined to the same space every day. So I know you mentioned, like, coming up with unique ways that you can really help your employees, or doing a check-in, or making it a regularly scheduled thing in your calendar that once or twice a week you block off an hour just to really check on your employees, just to make sure they're okay. Have a personal chat with them with a glass of wine or a beer or something, just to make them feel somewhat normal, somewhat in normalcy. In terms of recruiting, I think the ultimate right now is social media. I mean, that's where most people's eyeballs are. Even though we're online all day, we're still on social media at night, because there's not much else, for a lot of people, there's not much else to do, right? So if you don't have a strategy, really think about I know we just started an accounting and finance group on Facebook, Instagram. We didn't have that, and we already are gaining so much momentum, just because everybody's creating profiles to keep in touch with their families, with their friends, and while they're on there, it's a perfect way to also interact from a professional standpoint. So if you don't have a social media strategy, I know we're very focused on it at TorontoJobs.ca, and I think, Marc, you put the link there. But just really, it's a great way to connect with people. Obviously, LinkedIn is probably the best for business, but also, through Facebook, Instagram, we've made a lot of really great connections, and communicated even through businesses with that. So if you don't have a social media strategy, I would suggest that would be my number one tip for recruiting, especially now. And then, really taking care of your employees would be my second one.
Yeah. And, those are great points. And, one of the things that I hear a lot from partners and firms is, look, I don't get it. I don't know how to use it. I'm not sure what to do. So I hear that a lot, especially the older the person gets, the more it is that becomes more and more of a comment. So I always say, look, give it to somebody who wants to do it, who likes to do it. Maybe a student, maybe have somebody that you are that really is interested in doing that and is really familiar with it. We have on the recruiting team, we have a general model that says, hey, look, we don't care where the person comes from, as long as they hear and see us and see the posting and they apply. And encouraging them to apply is important. Now, whether that person comes from LinkedIn or whether that person comes from a job board or from a recruiter, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, trying to get more people to you is what the important thing is. But it could be from Facebook, could be from Instagram. It doesn't matter, as long as you're doing something.
Right. And just we have a question. So what are firms doing for policies from working from home? I think you kind of touched on it, and we've talked about it a little bit, but maybe you can elaborate some of the things that are being done.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that the whole office space, everything that transpired, just got shaken up in and around March the 15th of last year, and policies were just thrown upside down. They were just changed on the fly. Some partners did certain things with some of their teams, other partners did other things, and it created some differences between the teams. I know one firm where one partner said, "Hey, everybody's back. I want them back. I have to have them back." And where the rest of the firm, the other partner said, "I don't want them back. We want to work from home. We want to establish that." So really, what is the policy, and is there some flexibility? And I always say with policies, you can always throw in a line to say subject to management approval, or exceptions may apply. But right now, there's a lot of, what is the policy? What is going on? And I think that's really where partners and firms need to really sit down and go, okay, like team, partners, let's get together, and what is our policy? Because that may come back to bite you. It might not be an issue now, but it might be an issue when you're trying to call them back when they've been at home for 6 months, a year, and now you're telling them they got to come back to the office. Well, what was your policy? So really important to get that down and communicate that out with your staff.
That's great. That's perfect. And just one more question here. So what resources are there for public accounting firms specifically? So if they're looking, I think this is what this person's asking, if they're looking, for specific salary information or more specifics just pertaining to that specific job, where can they get information for that, or what resources are available for that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rachel. There's really not that many options available. I know there was a group of firms that got together years ago. I think they still have it. It's what's called a consortium, and it's a number of firms that banded together, and they said, we're not going to recruit from each other's firms, and we're going to share information, and we'll be good to go. But I'm not sure if the consortium's still around as it was before, but there's a lot of people that don't know. They don't talk to other firms. They don't know what to do. And I would say just call me. I'll have a chat. I'm happy to talk about kind of what's going on out there in the market. Sometimes there's no right or wrong answers. You have to adapt to your situation, what the cards that you have at your firm, how the work is handled. Are you able to have everybody work remotely? Maybe you're not set up for that. I know some firms. I know one particular client had envisioned something like this a long time ago, and they had it always set up that people could work from home, even though they had people coming into the office. So I think really, connecting with other firms. I mean, we have the CPA Firm Partners Conference coming up as well in a few weeks. So that could be somewhere where you can network, but building relationships with other firms, building relationships with recruiters like myself who are living and breathing this stuff every day, especially that, we specialize a lot in public accounting. So CPA firms can certainly reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk to them.
Perfect. I think that's all we have. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to post them. But I think that's all we have for questions, Marc. So
excellent. Well, thanks so much, Rachel, for organizing, and thanks very much for everybody for being here. And that's it, really. Reach out to me. My information's on the chat, and by all means, reach out to myself or Rachel. And if there's anything we can help you out with, then we go from there.
Amazing. And everyone have a great afternoon. And thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you, Rachel.